Welcome to the Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and we're here to talk about The Martian. Let me just preface everything I'm about to say that if The Martian is one of your favorite books, this is not a personal attack. And we may have vehemently different opinions about the book, but that's okay. Great minds disagree all the time. So, with that preference out of the way, here is my very unpopular opinion about The Martian. So, if you watched Book Tea with Tammy on the 14th, 13th of this week, month of May, you already know I vehemently despise this book. You just may not understand the depth of my problems with this book. I'm going to tell you straight up, because I can't give it, quote unquote, a negative rating. It is at best a quarter star for me. There is basic plot premise. This is the fourth mission to Mars, and one crew member gets left behind in an emergency, and the story is that crew member. Okay, there you go. Right off the bat, let's talk about the incredibly unnecessary amount of excessive swearing in this book. Like, it begins in the very first sentence of the book, which, given the circumstances of that first, it's largely told in epistolary format, by the way, through journal entries. I can understand, given the circumstances of that first journal entry, swearing. I honestly can't say that had I been in his shoes, I wouldn't have been swearing too. So, however, did it need to continue at the level of swearing it did? No. But it's easy filler. It's lazy. It is the lack of a thesaurus. Truly bothered me. Truly bothered me. This was a buddy read for me, and that is the only reason I finished this book, is because I didn't want to let my girlfriends down. Otherwise, I probably would have taken this book to the fireplace and lit it on fire. As it stands, it's going to go in my donation box to the library, and I shall never think of it again. So, our main character is named Mark Watney, and there are serious structural flaws with the character, and I use the term character here very loosely, of Mark Watney. As I put it in our group chat, he is made of tissue paper as a character, and he is really a caricature of a character. You know nothing. Do you want a bath? Stop. You know nothing of Mark Watney when the book opens up. You know nothing of his crewmates. You're just thrown into the chaos that is being left behind on Mars. And there's no backstory. You have no reason to feel any connection to him as a character or any compassion for him, except, as a general decent human being, you don't want him to be stranded on Mars indefinitely. And it just gets Okay, chicken's a little quieter. So you have no reason, other than being a decent human being, to feel any compassion for Mark Watney. So every crew member, and he was one of 6, has their personal laptop. They got to bring their own personal media files with them, music, books, television shows, whatever they chose, right? And over the course of the book, Mark proceeds to complain about all of the choices his fellow crew members made. Disco, 70s TV shows. One crew member was from Germany and everything he brought was in German. But at no point, she's very unhappy this morning. At no point in the story does Mark ever discuss what he brought. He never gives you any personal information about himself. Complaints about his crewmates, potential relationship between 2 of them. But there's nothing personal to the character of Mark. And what you're left with is really a protagonist of tissue paper. Which in and of itself is frustrating, but not enough to mark the book down to a 1/4 star. It is certainly floating at 2.5 for that, but... And then you get to the next biggest problem, and that is the overabundance of scientific detail. Like, I get this was a hard science fiction book, but I know more about poop and potatoes than I ever needed to know in my entire adult life, and I certainly didn't need page after page repetitive explanations of poop and potatoes, just like I didn't need repetitive explanations of how brilliant Mark is as a botanist and a mechanical engineer. And just the repetitive, overly detailed science thrown at the reader over and over and over again is exhausting. Like, not gonna lie, I have no problem when hard science fiction skims over my, flies right over my head and lands in the stratosphere. But it's not only landed in the stratosphere, I didn't read it. I skimmed it. After the first, 1/3 of the book, I was done with the science. I don't care about kilowatts of hours. I don't care about poops and potatoes and how to separate nitrogen, and so you get hydrogen chemicals from water. I don't care. So add that together with your tissue paper character, and there's another, easy, just huge markdown. And then eventually the book in chapter 10 gets to the most interesting part. And that's NASA. You actually get some human interaction because NASA discovers Mark's alive. And every time there was a NASA chapter, I cared because they were real people and they were having real conversations and there were real high stakes and they were fleshed out. Even if they only were on page, for one chapter, all of the NASA chapters was a story I wanted to read, right? I cared about what was happening at Mission Control. I cared about the fate of the crew. There is a character in NASA I don't like. She was truly hate written, and that is Annie, who is the PR director of communications, whatever her title was, for NASA. Today we would call her a Karen. She was hard, bitter, rude, swore like a, sailor from the 7th Fleet who hasn't been on shore for 6 months. Just abrasive and just unnecessarily dismissive of everyone else. That being said, at least I knew her personality. So the chapters then become a little more interspersed between Tissue Paper Mark and the NASA team. NASA chapters aren't very often, but they come in every once in a while. And eventually Mark gets to talk to NASA because he rescues an old Pathfinder on Mars, and they come up with a plan to get him off planet. Okay, fine, whatever. At this point, I don't care. I don't care that said brilliant scientist did something so incredibly stupid he loses contact with NASA for the remainder of the book. I don't care about his 3,200 kilometer drive. We'll talk about that in a second. To get from where his team was to the next mission where they're going to pick him up. I don't care. I don't care about craters. I don't care about moon dust. I don't care. He's collecting rocks along the way. I don't care. I don't care. So the drive from point A to point B, or from, mission gone wrong to rescuing Mark, is 3,200 kilometers. And throughout this book, everything is in metric, even though it's written by an American, it's published by an American author or American publishing house. Why are we talking about things in metric? I don't know how far 3,200 kilometers is. And to be honest, I didn't care enough to look up. I don't care about all the rocks from Mars. I don't care about, potatoes providing so many calories to keep him alive. I don't care. Finally, he gets to the point where NASA has told him to go to get picked up. He gets in touch with NASA. So they're communicating again. And then they tell you the plan to get him off planet to meet up with his original crew. Who, by the way, finally learn he's still alive. And they're going back to pick him up. And what is that plan? It is so mind-boggling stupid. I don't know how it ever would have made it through NASA. NASA, which is incredibly risk-averse for very obvious reasons, agrees to what any 5-year-old would tell you is a beyond silly idea. But no. To save Mark, the tissue paper character, we're going to do something incredibly stupid. At this point, I was skimming the entire book. I didn't care. And he finally gets off planet, and his crewmates rescue him, and then the book ends. That's it. Book just ends. Nobody gets back to Earth. You have no idea if the mission is successful, if he's ever reunited with his parents. There's no, wrap up with the NASA characters. It just abruptly falls off the cliff and ends. Really? I wasn't invested in the characters to begin with. And then we have this nonsensical ending. I am incredibly surprised that I didn't just burn the book. So frustrating. Like, so frustrating. Between the never-ending repetitive science, which the character I didn't know, more discussion of poop and potatoes than I ever needed for my entire lifetime. And no, there are no potatoes growing in those wonderful vegetable beds behind me, nor will there ever be now. And no idea who Mark Watney is as a character. Just, I so frustrated. There are a couple of brilliant moments in the book. There's references to the Dukes of Hazzard, Happy Days, Sanford and Son. There are a couple of really nostalgic references if you grew up in the 70s or you watched a lot of, reruns growing up. But they were nowhere close to saving the book. They were nowhere close to building a character background story for our alleged protagonist, because all of those books, there's an Agatha Christie reference too, all of those references are from crewmates you don't know. So the crewmates, you do get a little bit of an introduction to them throughout the book. You know the crewmates much better than you know the caricature of Mark Watney. He is just an astronaut made of tissue paper. And honestly, had I read this before I read Project Hail Mary, I never would have picked up Project Hail Mary. And that is, I absolutely think Project Hail Mary is brilliant, funny, relatable, character-driven. Yes, there's hard science, but I didn't skim it because it was integral to the story. I may not have understood it, but I still read it. And I find it incredibly difficult to believe that the man who wrote this somehow proceeds to write Project Hail Mary in the intervening 5 or 6 years. How is it possible? Because they are radically different books. You know who Ryland Grace is. You get his backstory. You get emotion and depth and all the things you want in a character in Project Hail Mary. And all of that is missing in The Martian. It is... I cannot recommend this book unless you need a hate read. And I mean a serious hate read. Because, to be honest, at the end of The Martian, I didn't care if he lived or died. I flat out did not care. I would have been perfectly happy had they failed to rescue him. I didn't know who he was. By the end of, 368 pages, I didn't know who this man was. And, no. Why did I waste my time? The most enjoyable part of this book was our discussion between us and how much we were all confused and how much was missing from this story. As you can tell, it was a very frustrating read for me. I am donating this copy to my library. It will go in the bookshop. Somebody else will read it. I'm hoping they have a better reading experience than I did because I had a very bad one. So, there is my unpopular opinion. Nothing you can say will sway me from it because there is nothing redeeming in this book. Not one thing. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Like and subscribe. And Pickles and I will see you here next time at the Protagonist Puff.